This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today we'll feel and experience old Hollywood, featuring an interview with wonderful Martin Turnbull.
There's a place called Hightower, and it's not really even a neighborhood. It's more like a community tucked in behind the Hollywood Bowl. And the residents get there by a tower. There's I want to say, 4-story tower that only residents have access to. And you can walk up some stairs, but it's this beautiful little neighborhood that has no roads through it. It's just walking paths. And you can take the steps up via next to the tower, and you can walk this path through this tiny little tucked away community neighborhood of beautiful little houses. Each one is completely different from the other. And you walk through this community, and it lets you down on Highland Avenue, turn left, and there's the Hollywood Bowl. And so for me, that's just it's a place that I take people who have been to LA before, and I want to take them to places they may not know about. And you never fail to surprise and shock people when I take them there, because you just don't know that it's there unless you know it's there.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to experience one of the most authentic old Hollywood areas in Los Angeles? Perched high above the chaos of Hollywood Boulevard, nestled between the winding canyons and steep inclines, lies Hollywood Heights, a secret world built for those who wanted to be close to the magic of Hollywood, yet hidden away from its prying eyes. It's a place where history lingers in the staircases, where stories echo off the old stucco walls, and where every winding path holds a whisper of old Hollywood glamour. It all began in 1902 when H.J. Whitley, a visionary developer, saw potential in the rugged landscape that had once been part of the Rancho La Brea land grant. At the time, Los Angeles was still growing, and the concept of a neighborhood perched on the steep hillsides seemed like something out of a European dream. But Whitley pressed on, carving out what would become the Hollywood Ocean View Tract, later known as Hollywood Heights. For more than a century, it remained a hidden jewel, but in 2023, the Los Angeles City Council officially recognized Hollywood Heights as one of the city's distinct neighborhoods, a long overdue acknowledgement of this tucked away enclave's charm and significance. The first residents of Hollywood Heights weren't thinking about wide roads or driveways. They were drawn to the breathtaking views and seclusion. Cars were impractical on the steep, narrow roads, so the neighborhood developed a network of staircases and walkways that wove between the homes, connecting neighbors in a way that felt more like a European village than a bustling American city. The most famous of these is the High Tower Elevator, a 5-story open cab that slowly lifts passengers from their garages to their clifftop homes, revealing panoramic views of Hollywood and beyond. The High Tower Elevator and the hidden enclave of High Tower Court are easy to miss, and that's by design. Despite being just a stone's throw from the Hollywood Bowl, this towering relic of old Hollywood remains a well-kept secret, known only to its residents and the occasional film buff who has spotted it on screen. Created in 1923 by architect Carl Kay, the 100-foot-tall elevator was inspired by the medieval towers of Bologna, Italy. But this wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a necessity. The steep, twisting streets of Hollywood Heights made it nearly impossible to build driveways or wide roads, and for the residents perched high above the city, climbing 200 steps to reach their homes was an exhausting daily ordeal. Kay's solution, a private 5-story elevator that would transport residents effortlessly from their garages below to their hilltop homes above. It was an ambitious project that came at a significant cost, around $50,000 at the time, which is over $800,000 today, adjusted for inflation. But it transformed Hollywood Heights into one of the most unique residential areas in Los Angeles. Hollywood Heights has always been a sanctuary for artists, musicians, and actors, those who crave inspiration but also seek refuge from the relentless pace of Hollywood, even today wandering through its secret staircases and vine-draped walkways feels like stepping into a different world. The scent of blooming jasmine fills the air, and the deep purple hues of jacaranda trees provide shade along the paths. It's a place that slows you down, invites you to take in the details, and reminds you that not everything in life needs to be rushed. For those who love a bit of adventure, there is a 1-mile network of stairs and hidden paths waiting to be explored. And if you work up an appetite, you can end your journey with dinner and a cocktail at Yamashiro, perched high above the city with one of the most breathtaking views in Los Angeles. The homes in Hollywood Heights are as eclectic as the people who have lived in them, from ranch-style retreats to Tuscan-inspired villas, and even a few mid-century masterpieces designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and his son, Lloyd Wright. The architecture is a reflection of the neighborhood's layered history. The Samuel Freeman House, one of the most famous homes here, stands as a testament to the artistic spirit that has long defined the area. The list of Hollywood Heights past residents reads like a who's who of Hollywood history. Adriana Caselotti, the original voice of Snow White, spent over 400 years here. During the 70s, the hills were alive with music as legends like Jackson Browne, Glenn Frey of the Eagles, John David Souther, and Gene Clark of the Byrds made their homes here, shaping the sound of California rock. Even Bela Lugosi's widow lived here, embroiled in a battle over his estate while Universal Studios profited from his likeness. More recently, desperate housewife star Eva Longoria owned a charming Mediterranean home on Rockledge before selling it. With red clay tile roofs, cascading bougainvillea, and the shimmering skyline in the distance, Hollywood Heights remains a refuge, a place that has always drawn dreamers, artists, and seekers of solitude. For those just arriving in Hollywood, eager to chase their ambitions, it's a neighborhood that offers something rare, a quiet escape where creativity thrives. For those lucky enough to call it home, Hollywood Heights isn't just a place to live, it's a state of mind, an invitation to step back in time, breathe in the beauty, and embrace the magic of old Hollywood, where the past and the present exist in perfect harmony. And here we are. Welcome to Old Hollywood. I'm absolutely delighted to have Martin Turnbull here with me. Originally from Melbourne, Australia, Martin Turnbull has always been drawn to history, storytelling, and the golden age of Hollywood. After moving to Los Angeles in the mid-90s, he worked as a private tour guide, sharing the city's storied past, and deepened his expertise through historical guiding with the Los Angeles Conservancy and time on the Warner Brothers movie lot. Inspired by his love for classic cinema, Martin turned to writing, bringing Hollywood's past to life through Hollywood's Garden of Allah series, a 9-novel saga set between 1927 and 1959 at the legendary Garden of Allah Hotel. He continues to write historical fiction, capturing the glamour, ambition, and behind-the-scenes drama of old Hollywood, ensuring its magic endures. Please check out Martin's website at www.martinturnbull.com. And today, Martin will take us on a very special journey to the golden age of Hollywood. Hello, Martin.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. Thank you.
Martin, what a joy for me to have you on my podcast today. And you are quite a legendary person who knows about old Hollywood probably more than anyone else. So it's very special for me to have you as my guest.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I'm not quite sure that I know more than anybody else, because there are a lot of people who are interested in this same subject of LA history and Hollywood history and the studios and the movie stars. I know what I know for the purposes of my novels, which cover quite a section of Hollywood history. But you know what? That's very kind of you to say.
Well, let me just add, more than anyone else who's from Melbourne, Australia.
Okay. Now that one, I'll take that one. Yes, I'll take that one.
Well, you were born and raised in Melbourne, Australia. And what actually first drew you to Los Angeles, and what made you decide to stay?
Well, I was originally came here for work. I worked in the travel industry, and I was headhunted by an Australian and New Zealand travel company who needed somebody to come to their LA office because I was familiar with the travel industry and the travel industry technology and, of course, the destination. I was a good fit, and I had no intention of leaving Melbourne because Melbourne is a wonderful place to live. But, you know, I had no mortgage. I was single. There was no reason why I couldn't go off to LA for a 3-year adventure because the contract was for 3 years. And LA is Hollywood, and Hollywood history and Hollywood movies has long been my passion. So it was an easy yes to make. I thought I would be here 3 years, but it's now been 28 years, and now I've made my career writing about Hollywood. So it just seems like a natural fit. And as a friend of mine, an old friend of mine said to me, you know what, it just seemed like, of course, that's where you would end up. Where else would you end up in the world but LA, because of your history and what you think about and what you write about? It seemed like an obvious place for me to end up. But now that I've been here so long, I can't imagine my life not having ended up up here because all roads seem to point to LA and Hollywood for me. And so when the opportunity came along, of course, I jumped and I'm still here.
Yes, yes, here you are. And I'm very curious, what was the moment or experience that first sparked your fascination with classic Hollywood? And maybe it was a particular film, actor, or story. I mean, how well known is Hollywood in Melbourne?
Well, for me, it started pretty early. I was probably about 11 or 12. I probably wasn't in high school yet. So let's say 11 or 12. And I saw in our local cinema, which was a 1930s movie house, that The Wizard of Oz was playing. And The Wizard of Oz in Australia isn't like it is here, played traditionally every year. It was just an old movie. And I thought, and I knew enough to know that it was an important movie and it was a well-known movie. And because it wasn't broadcast on Australian TV, this may have been my only chance to see it. So I jumped on my bicycle and I rode to the Dendy Theatre. I walked into the theatre and I remember there was about 12 people in the whole place. It was quite a big theatre. And so I managed to find a very good to sit in. And the movie started and it was like the clouds parted or something. The movie just washed over me and I was just gobsmacked at what I saw. I was not prepared for the experience that I had. And I still remember walking out of that theatre speechless at what I had seen. And if somebody had taken a photo of me, I swear you could have seen the stars swirling in my eyes because I couldn't put words together to articulate what I had seen. And at that point, I became an instant fan of Judy Garland, of The Wizard of Oz, of MGM movies, of Hollywood movies, of Technicolor movies. It was just the start of everything. Then my world just sort of opened up to the whole experience of old movies and what they were and how they were and where they lived in our social history and our social conscience. That was the very start of it all.
Wow, you were completely enchanted by The Wizard of Oz.
At about the age of 11. Yeah.
That is so wild. So when you first came to Hollywood, did you remember Hollywood the way you actually imagined it in your mind?
Well, in the first week, I went to see a movie at Grauman's Chinese, and it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, as it happens. It just didn't really matter what movie it was. I just wanted to sit in Grauman's Chinese, and I remember thinking as the movie was starting, I was thinking I could not believe that my life had taken this path, and now I was seeing a movie at Grauman's Chinese that I'd been reading about at this point for best part of 15 years. And it honestly kind of felt like home. It's like, oh, okay, here I am. Of course I'm here. This is where it was in part amazing that I could be sitting here as now a new resident of LA. But in other ways, it was like, well, of course I am. This is exactly where I want to be and should be. And now through a stroke of luck that I never saw coming, here I was. It wouldn't surprise me because when I moved here, I just sort of fit right in. There wasn't really any necessary period of adjustment. I knew the layout of LA and I knew the history of LA and California life isn't that different from Australian life because the climate is similar. And so it's a very sort of, both places have a very outdoor-oriented life, healthy food, working out, whatever you believe, that's fine by me. Whatever you do, that's fine by me as I live and let live. So the Australian life and California life are very similar in that respect. So if I had ended up in the middle of winter in North Dakota or in Alabama or somewhere in the deep South, I don't know that I would have lasted beyond the 3-year contract that I was on. But LA life and Australia life, it was just parallel lives. So I just fit right in very, very happily and very easily.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. So, Martin, as someone who has explored LA so deeply, both personally and professionally, what is a place in the city that feels to you the most timeless and where you can still sense the echoes of old Hollywood?
2 places come to mind, actually. One isn't surprising, one might be surprising. The first place that really comes to mind is the gate of Paramount Studios, because the studios, none of them really have, apart from Paramount, have a particularly remarkable front gate where people come in. Warner Brothers doesn't, MGM, Sony doesn't, Columbia didn't, but Paramount Gate, everybody knows the Paramount Gate. If you watch any old movies at all, it has a very distinctive architecture to it, structure to it, and the look is the Paramount. So, and I have a friend who lives near the Paramount Gate, and every time I drive to or from her place, I feel like I'm in Hollywood. And of course, it's the only major studio lift that's actually in Hollywood. And so for me, that gets extra points. But there's something about the Paramount Gate maybe evokes images of Norma Desmond driving through in Sunset Boulevard. It just speaks Hollywood to me every time. It hasn't changed. And it to me, it epitomizes Hollywood every bit as much as the Hollywood sign does.
Mm-hmm.
Or any of the other places you can imagine. For me, the Paramount Gate. The other one is less known, is a place called Hightower, and it's not really even a neighborhood. It's more like a community tucked in behind the Hollywood Bowl. And the residents get there by a tower. There's I want to say, 4-story tower that any residents have access to. And you can walk up some stairs, but it's this beautiful little neighborhood that has no roads through it. It's just walking paths. And you can take the steps up via next to the tower, and you can walk this path through this tiny little tucked away community neighborhood of beautiful little houses. Each one is completely different from the other, and you walk through this community, and it lets you down on Highland Avenue, turn left, and there's the Hollywood Bowl. And so for me, that's just it's a place that I take people who have been to LA before, and I want to take them to places they may not know about. And you never fail to surprise and shock people when I take them there, because you just don't know that it's there unless you know it's there. And the fact that it's next to the Hollywood Bowl, which is a public park, so you're allowed to walk into the Hollywood Bowl and take a seat if doesn't matter what's going on. It's a public park, so you have access to it. So there are some times when you can't, but it's just that little enclave of the Hollywood Bowl, and you're up from Hollywood and Highland, so you're within shouting distance of Grauman's Chinese and the forecourt and all that. And it's just a little corner of LA that I like to take people that, I mean, in the 28 years I've been taking people there, I don't think it's ever changed. Maybe some of the houses got a paint job or something, but it's just this beautiful little tucked away neighborhood.
Oh, wow. Those two places, the way you described them, they sound really, really special.
They are, yeah.
So, Martin, in writing about Hollywood's golden age, which you've done quite a lot, did you uncover any hidden gems, maybe stories or maybe even people that have been largely forgotten but deserve to be remembered?
Well, the first series of books that I wrote is the series I'm most known for, which is the Hollywood's Garden of Allah series, which was set at the Garden of Allah Hotel, which was on the eastern gateway of the Sunset Strip. And when I discovered that place existed, I was quite mystified, because I'd been reading books about Hollywood and Hollywood people since the mid-'70s. And I'd never heard of this place. And it has such an illustrious guest list. I mean, everybody from Bogey and Bacall to David Niven and Errol Flynn and half the members of the Algonquin Round Table. The list of people who've stayed there and who've partied there is basically everybody who's ever stayed there, ever worked in Hollywood. And it was such a unique place that I thought, well, how did I miss this? How do I know about this place? And I went hunting for more information, and there was only really just one book that was published in 1970 by a gossip columnist, Sheila Graham, who was dating F. Scott Fitzgerald, who also stayed there in the late 30s. And it was just this hidden in plain sight gem that was really one of the centers of Hollywood social life in the Hollywood, especially late 20s through to after the war. I had to dig further, because this was a place that was quite central and been completely forgotten. And when I dug further, I found out the history of the place was actually the home of a silent movie star who I'd also never heard of, a Russian actress by the name of Alena Zimova. And I had no idea this woman existed, let alone what she managed to achieve. And I know you've had Romy Norlinger on your podcast, and she's spoken about that, so listeners can listen to that episode.
Yes.
But she was a groundbreaking woman, actress, activist, producer, director, writer. She was the original multi-hyphenate as far as I'm concerned. And she's been completely forgotten, mostly, I think, because most of her work was in silent films, and most of those silent films have been lost to time. The couple that remain are on YouTube, which is kind of ironic, because the movies that ruined her financially is all we really have of her, apart from a few speaking roles in a late career in her 40s, thanks to David Selznick. Most of her work is lost, but the two that was really ruinous to her career are the ones we have on YouTube and various places. So I've kind of made it my business to let people know that such a place existed and such a woman existed, because both of them were lost to time until I started digging around. I mean, a few people would have known Nazimova, especially if you're into silent film, and a few people into LA history would have known the Garden of Valor, but not enough people did, not as many people did. And if I didn't, and I've been reading about this place and these people for years and years and years, I've kind of made it my mission to let people know that such a unique and beautiful place and unique and beautiful person as Nazimova, they both existed and contributed to this town in ways that most people don't realize.
Yes, yes, this is so true. And I'm very grateful to you for uncovering her story and for sharing it with the world. And thanks to you, in big way, Romy Nordlinger was able to bring to life Alla Nazimova's story in her one-woman show.
Yes.
That is very special. So thank you, Martin, for doing this incredible work.
Thank you.
So my next question to you, if you could step back into any era of Hollywood history, which decade would you choose and why? Like, for example, you can imagine that you're transported to that time, and who would be your closest friends in the industry, and what would your days look like?
Well, that's an easy question for me to answer. It would be 1939. I mean, I'd go back to the 1930s, but specifically, I would go to 1939 because 1939 is known as Hollywood's greatest year. And in fact, I'm writing a trilogy right now called the Hollywood's Greatest Year trilogy because so much happened and so many classic movies came out in 1939. Very, very special year. It was really the year that golden era Hollywood reached its zenith. There were arguments to be made that other years did, but this is the year that not just Gone with the Wind, that The Wizard of Oz, Wuthering Heights, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Goodbye Mr. Chips, The Women, Stagecoach. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it's Hollywood at its zenith. So these people, the writers, the directors, the cameramen, the costumers, these people were working at their peak of their powers. And I would want to be in Hollywood, in LA, just bathing in all that talent and all that creativity and all those towering achievements these movies were. Keeping in mind that people were making movies for often just 1 week at a cinema and then it goes back into the vault.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then it was a big movie like Gone with the Wind and would have a second release 10 years later, and probably The Women did as well. For the most part, these movies were thought of as having a week or two. Like at Grauman's Chinese, the most common run at Grauman's Chinese was a week. And if it was really good, it would be held over for a number of weeks. And then back into the vault, and that was the end of it. So these people were slaving over every single detail of these movies for something that people would see once. And after a week, the next movie would come in. And the dedication that these people showed, it was a real craft that I would want to swim around in those waters. And I'd want to go to Brown Derby with them, and I'd want to go to Ciro's with them, and I'd want to sit in MGM's commissary next to the cast of The Women or to George Cukor. Not that George Cukor probably sat in the commissary, but Mickey Rooney probably did, and so did Judy Garland and Hedy Lamarr. They would have all been there. So I don't know that I would have the temerity to walk up to Hedy Lamarr or Tyrone Power and say, "Hey, can we have lunch?" I don't know. Maybe I would. Maybe I'd say, "What the hell?" They can say no. They can just sort of turn their back on me, and I really wouldn't mind. I wouldn't blame them. But to be swimming around at the height of Hollywood creativity would be the first place I would go to if I was in my little time machine and I had to press the buttons of the destination. That's right where I would go, no question about it.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's so special. And what job do you think you would have? Would you be a journalist? Would you be a PR agent? Would you be an actor yourself?
I would probably, I would be a journalist, like for the Hollywood Reporter. One of the characters in my Hollywood Garden of Valor novels works as a gossip columnist for the Hollywood Reporter. And in her role, she has access to everybody from Louis B. Mayer down to the shoeshine boy at the Ambassador Hotel and everybody in between. And she, in the course of the 9 books, which covers 32 years, she's basically met with, interviewed with, danced with, and or slept with everybody you can imagine. Because the reality is that the Luella Parsons and the Hedda Hoppers and the Sheila Grahams of this world met and socialized and worked with all of these people on a daily basis. And so somebody like that having access to every level of Hollywood not just the studio moguls and the stars, but if she had a story from the grip that's standing up in the lights when somebody has a meltdown, that's a handy person to know, or somebody who's sneaking into the Chateau Marmont for a weekend with his co-star. Well, you're going to talk to the check-in person at the Chateau Marmont, aren't you? Yes, you are.
Yes.
So probably that's if I could wriggle my nose and invent myself a job, that's probably what I would do.
And I would guess that if you were a journalist for Hollywood Reporter, you would have no problem coming up to Heidi Lamar.
I would like to think I had the balls for that, but Hedy Lamarr was actually, no, there is a story that Sheila Graham tells that they were at, I think it was at the Brown Derby, the Vine Street Brown Derby. Anyway, it was a Saturday night, and they were having dinner, and they looked across and they saw Hedy Lamarr having dinner at, I think was the Brown Derby, by herself. And Sheila tells the story that F. Scott Fitzgerald sort of turned to Sheila and said, well, there's Hollywood for you. The most beautiful girl in the world has no one to have dinner with on a Saturday night.
Oh.
And that's kind of a crushing story, but Joan Crawford said the same thing. Joan Crawford said, and this was when she was really at the height of her powers too, she said that when you get to my level of stardom, everybody thinks you've got a date, so nobody calls.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that says a lot about reaching the zenith of your profession, that you would assume that Hedy Lamarr and the Joan Crawfords and the Betty Davises all had lined up a date for Saturday night, and everybody's assuming the same thing, so nobody calls you. And that says a lot about what it's like at the top, and we all strive, whatever our industry is, whatever our job is, we're all striving to reach the zenith of what we can attain. But what happens when you get there? It's lonely at the top.
Yes.
And that's always that story. The story about Hedy Lamarr dining by herself and having F. Scott Fitzgerald and Sheila Graham looking on, going, well, that's kind of Hollywood there for you. So be careful what you wish for, I think is the lesson there.
Yes, there is a price to pay for everything.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, Martin, Hollywood today is vastly different from the era that you write about, and very different from 1939, where we just had a little trip with your time machine. So what do you think modern filmmakers could learn from classic Hollywood?
The people who worked in the studio system, at least the people who left behind autobiographies and memoirs, often complained about the restrictions and constrictions of working in a studio system where you worked 6 days a week and you were expected to go out, and I'm talking about the stars here and none of the directors, 6 days a week, and you were expected to go out on the town at least a couple of nights a week, be very visible, and there was a lot demanded of you. And I can understand why you'd chafe under that, and you'd be handed movie roles that you weren't right for, or that you didn't want to do, or you just wanted a week off in between roles to sort of to let go of the last role and prepare for the next role. And no, you finished a role on Saturday afternoon and you started the next one on Monday. And that can't have been easy. But at the same time, as I was saying before, you have people who are highly skilled at their job. The cameramen, the makeup people, the costume people, that's all they did. And so they became very, very skilled what they did. So those close-ups on Joan Crawford didn't just happen. There was a director, there was a lighting, there was a cameraman, there was a makeup person, there was a costumer. And they all contribute to make these incredible images that now 50, 60, 70, 80 years later, we are still talking about. Mm-hmm. I think there's a reason for that. And it's the system forced you whatever your role was, it forced you to be the best you could, to do the best you could in the least amount of time, because time is money. And out of that came a superlative movie a week. These studios were producing a movie a week at their peak, and that peak lasted for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And not all of them worked as well as they should have. Not all of them are classics, sure, but there's enough for a cable TV channel to fill programming 24/7 with these movies that we are still talking about today. So I think a lot could be learned from just banding together and making the best movie you can. And I don't work in the movie, so maybe that's what they're already doing. But the way these studios were able to streamline everybody's jobs so they didn't have to worry about anything but their job. So they became masters of their own specific domain. So whatever the movie was, whatever the era was, whatever the subject was, whoever the star was, they knew exactly how to do the best at their job and produce art, because I think these movies are art, that we're still talking about all these decades later.
Yes, this is so true. Very, very true. So, Martin, Looking back on your own journey from a kid in Melbourne, enchanted by The Wizard of Oz, to an author breathing life into Hollywood's past, what has this path taught you about pursuing your passions?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I think what it's taught me is persistence is everything. I've written a book, I've written a novel a year for the last 12 years. And these are type of books that I just can't make up off the top of my head. I have to research them quite thoroughly to make sure I get the history right and the chronology right. And I've learned that it's amazing what you can do if you work on something. It doesn't have to be every day, a consistent pace. And you don't wait for inspiration to hit you. You put your behind in the seat, you put your fingers on the keyboard, and you start writing. Because there have been times where I know where I need to get my character to this particular point at let's say, the 1939 Academy Awards. How to get him there at the start of my writing session? I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm going to have to figure it out. Well, that doesn't come from just staring into space, or it doesn't for me. It comes from fingers on the keyboard. And if I have to type the words, I have no idea how I'm going to get Marcus Adler to the Academy Awards in 1939 at the Coconut Grove. And as I'm typing these words, I go, oh, the Coconut Grove, that was at the Ambassador Hotel, and that was on Wilshire. Now, opposite it was the Brown Derby, which was shaped like a hat. And that's where he met. Oh, so then the ideas start to flow. And then maybe that idea wasn't great, but that'll give birth to another idea. And then suddenly the ideas start to flow. Because I think people think that you writers wait for inspiration to hit, like it's going to come from like a UFO out of space and just hit you in the face. And that's not the way it works. The ideas flow when you're doing something, preferably hitting your keys on the keyboard. And that was something that I learned. I had this romantic view that novelists, that the words just flow out of novelists' fingertips because the muse has visited them and divine inspiration. No, none of that. It's actually sitting down, doing the work of exploring ideas, however that looks to you, whether you're scribbling on paper on pencil, or you're diagramming your characters, or you're exploring the events of the time period you're writing at. As long as you're actively engaged in your story, the words will come, the inspiration will come, the ideas will come, and then eventually the right idea will come. And suddenly you have that light bulb moment, and then things start to flow. That isn't what I would have thought how it worked, but that's how I've discovered it worked. And for me, I do this every day, especially if I'm writing a first draft. I like to write every day because there's a rhythm that you get into. And the more that you write, the more the ideas flow to you. And it was a revelation that that's the way the creative process works. It just doesn't hit you like a bolt of lightning out of the sky.
Yes. And it sounds like instead of waiting for inspiration, you inspire yourself. And one last question, Martin. If your work could leave one lasting impression on readers, what would you hope it to be?
I have fascinated by what was going on behind the scenes, because these people who were making these movies during Hollywood's golden age, they spent a lot of time and effort putting together perfect images of perfect people in perfect lighting and perfect clothes. And I kind of find that fascinating. But the cost that it took to create these images of perfection, the price was high. I mean, these people were working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, sometimes to 2 o'clock in the morning. But also the price of fame, the cost of fame, and the way people buckled under the weight of the attention that came to their work. Mostly the stars, but not just the stars, the writers and the directors and the moguls as well. So that they would crumble under, their marriages would crumble, or they would descend into alcoholism, or they would marry 17 times. These things came at a price, which is the story that I find the most fascinating, is what happened to you when you reached your goal and you became a star, or you became your studio's #1 director. What was the price paid? So if anything, I would encourage people to realize that these movies came at a cost, and sometimes a good cost. I mean, you're earning $5,000 a week. That's wonderful. You had a lovely house, but you've got 14 divorces behind you. So your life was probably a mess. And that was the price that these people paid to provide us with entertainment that has stood the test of time for decades after they were made, and I would imagine for decades to come.
Yes, absolutely agree. Well, Martin, Thank you so much for this incredible conversation and for sharing your stories and for sharing the enchantment of old Hollywood with all of us, because you never know when the next kid in whatever part of the world will see The Wizard of Oz again and will become
Yes.
fascinated by it, and their entire life will change, because we still believe in magic, and magic is everywhere. So thank you for sharing it with us.
And thank you for inviting me on your wonderful podcast. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Martin. Until next time. Thank you very much for tuning in to Feel and Experience Old Hollywood with my special guest, Martin Turnbull. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform, and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California, and check out my website, www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. Selling and buying homes with soul is not just my real estate strategy. It's an intuitive and holistic approach that embraces your values, aspirations, and conscious intentions. If you want to discover the power of mindfulness in your real estate journey with my compassionate guidance, I'm here for you. Next time, we'll journey to Altadena, where we'll meet a family whose home bravely survived the ravages of the Eaton fire. Their story of resilience, courage, and hope in the face of adversity is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of community. Please join me in hearing their remarkable story. See you then.
In the Mood for California. Feel the soul of Old Hollywood.